Okay, hello. Today is Thursday, the 29th of May in 2025, and I'm pleased that today I'm going to be having a discussion with Kim Ann Curtin. For those who don't know her, she is a trading coach, and in my opinion, a very good one. She has written a couple books that I read and that I would recommend. One is called Transforming Wall Street: A Conscious Path to a New Future. And another one is called The Five Practices to Become a Better Trader. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Jason, so much. I'm happy to have you and allow me to interview you for the five practices to become a better trader. You dropped some gems in that, so thank you.
Yeah, it was fun. The reason, honestly, that I bring Kim on board today is a couple weeks ago, she offered to give me this test. It's sort of a psychological test, which was very simple. I was actually amazed at how simple the questions were and how simple it was to answer them. But when she came back at me with the results and went through the results and we spoke about it for quite a while, I found it very interesting. I think a lot of it nailed a lot of my personality. Which is interesting, and it nailed a lot of things that maybe I wasn't so aware of, which is important. Obviously, we all have our defense mechanisms and all that, and we block out some things we don't want to know. And because trading is such a mental game,
Mm.
I would argue 90% of it is in here. It's important to know these things about your personality and where it may be helping and, or more importantly, hurting you on this quest. And I thought that this test and Kim's interpretation and explanation to me of the results did a really good job of capturing it.
Thank you.
So that's about all I know about it.
Yeah.
So from here, I will let Kim take over and speak to whatever she wants to speak to, this particular test or other things she does or whatever it is.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason, for your trust to do it with me in the first place, because I think it, ask for a level of vulnerability whenever we take assessments. So just thank you for being willing to do it in the first place. All I feel this assessment does is allow all of us, me included, to just be able to see under the hood of what might be operating behind the scenes. And in my experience, traders have a tendency to be incredibly hard on themselves and sort of nobody's been shocked by the results I've given them. With this assessment, I call it the Trader Positioning Index. What they are shocked about is that it is able to identify what these potential hindrances are. But I've not, in the 4 years I've been using it, had anybody say, I guess one trader did say, I don't think that's true. His came back as conflict averse. And he's like, I'm not conflict averse. He said, actually, sometimes I'm, very confrontational. But in a week afterwards, he realized, oh my God, I get confrontational because I avoid the conflict in the moment it happens. So it, I think, just helps us understand ourselves better and gives us perhaps clarity about what we want to put some time and energy into, as opposed to knowing that perhaps there's a roadblock and not being quite sure about how to handle it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
I think we're all creatures that come from situations in our life where we had to cope. And so we developed strategies that helped us cope with whatever those challenges were. Often this goes back to our childhood. And if there were challenges we had to navigate as kids, well, I see us as incredibly resilient that we navigated them on our own. But those ways of coping from earlier in our life aren't necessarily needed anymore. And in fact, perhaps cost us in how we're showing up now, because that was then and this is now. And those very behaviors or tendencies that saved our butt in the past now cost us, now cost a trader from being able to perhaps size up or be able to take a loss in stride. And so I'm just sort of like, dial back the self-judgment and dial up the self-awareness. And then you have a much better chance at pivoting or, taking what the market gives you in stride as opposed to, forcing. It's like, salmon swimming upstream. Like it's a lot of work. They get beaten up and bruised. Why make there be more cost for your journey if you can learn how to get into that flow state, that Csikszentmihalyi from years ago talked about in his book Flow. What if that flow state is available to all of us, but we aren't available to it because of old programming, old patterns?
Yeah, no, I think that as a student of psychology and coming from a family of psychologists and psychiatrists,
Wow.
I think that that's it. We develop as a kid coping mechanisms,
Yeah.
as we have to do to
Yeah.
get through the fact that my father was this and that, and my mother was this and that,
Yeah.
and my brother and my sister, and my social status in school, and we have to develop these things in order to get by.
Totally.
But you're right; those things then later in life are so deeply embedded. We have to figure out a way to let go of those.
Yeah.
And I think that what you said is so right. Why not learn how to understand yourself rather than
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah.
And again, that's a whole psychology thing. But in trading alone, in everything, this stuff is true. Relationships, everything. But
Totally. It feel like
with
the
trading,
market.
these things really show themselves. Um,
I feel it's the best school of enlightenment out there, Jason. I feel it's going to force every place that you have not healed in your face. And I think that's why we sometimes hear traders say, like, can you believe it did that to me? The market did that to me. And I'm like, what if you turn that around to, what if the market is happening for you? What if it's not the enemy, but actually a friend, a Yoda, a teacher who's trying to up level you and heal you from that which holds you back?
that's it. That's
Then,
it.
then you
Very
get
hard to
less
do.
defensive.
It's
Then
very
you
hard to do.
take it less personal, take it personally in a positive way. Like it's happening for me, not to me. It's trying to help me heal, help me release all the chains that hold me back.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I go through it. I still, after God knows how many years I've been doing this, have a hard time seeing the market as my friend and not an enemy because a friend does not treat me the way that the market treats me quite often. But you have to just embrace it. It is what it is. You're not going to change what the market does. So it's like you have to be able to embrace that. And before you can embrace that, I think one has to embrace themselves.
100%, 100%.
And be okay with things like, and these are the things that, I think we develop big defense systems against being wrong.
Yeah,
Well, we learned our whole life that being wrong is not good,
yeah,
right? And that I think leads into the thing of why people have such a hard time taking losses, right?
yeah, 100%. Yeah,
And having a hard time taking losses is what blows up a trader at the end of
yeah,
the day. We all get things wrong. We all have to take losses. I have said before, people like call me a market wizard because I happened to be in this book that was named Market Wizards, right? And
yeah,
it's a silly moniker. But my answer is always, if you want to call me a market wizard, understand it's only true because I am much better than most people at taking losses. That's it. I don't have any ability to predict the market any better than anybody else. But I do a very good job of most of the time of taking losses,
yeah, yeah,
and that really is, I think, step one for people, right? It's
yeah,
okay to be wrong. And you see these people all the time talking about, oh, I think the market's going to do this and I think the market's going to do that. And all that ends up doing is making your ego even more
for sure. For sure.
attached to that idea and making it even harder to take a loss and admit you were wrong, right?
Definitely, definitely.
Um,
But that's because somebody's identity becomes collapsed with them being right.
yes.
And that is such a dangerous game because then you're going to always be at the mercy of external factors, which you have no control over, not just in the market, but in life. And it's like, but that shame, I think it's the shame, especially we, both know it's mostly men who are traders. So the culture consistently tells men that their value is equal to their productiveness, what they produce. And so I think it's a lot of pressure to they don't want to be wrong because they then feel shame if they are wrong and they didn't produce. And that to me is just, going to put them in a vicious cycle of never feeling like they're enough. So it's like, how do you separate your self-worth from that concept of making a mistake? Because, everybody listening to us presumably is from planet Earth. And so that means that they are human. Humans are by nature fallible creatures. So you're just fighting your nature if you fight the fact that you're going to be wrong sometimes. You're just human.
That's right. And I find, I think about this all the time, to my detriment sometimes, because most people are not traders. And I deal with people in life and I watch and I observe them. And, things like politics, for example, which is a very emotional subject with people, they take a stand, and then every piece of evidence that they see proves that they are right. Whereas someone on the other side of the political spectrum takes the opposite stand, and every piece of evidence they see proves that they are right. And there's no way to prove this. So if you want to convince yourself that you were right, then you can do that all day long.
Totally.
But in the markets, that ain't going to work.
Nope.
You know what I mean? The markets aren't going to be like that. They're, hey, I bought this thing at 10 and now it's at 5, but I know I'm right. Well, you're not right because the thing just halved. You are wrong. And what you should have done was cut it at 9, most likely, right?
Yep. Yep. But it's a righteousness. It's this is what we see in politics. I don't know if you ever read Jonathan Haidt's book. It's called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Disagree on Politics and Religion. We become righteous, self-righteous in our opinions when we don't have a really deep sense of our value. And if we think our value or worthiness has to be earned, then we're going to be always in this desperate attempt to prove our value. It's like you retain your value even when you make a mistake, even when you misinterpret the market. It doesn't mean your value goes out the window. It just means you didn't get that particular prediction correct. But when our value gets collapsed with our being correct or not, I think it just becomes like almost life and death to be right emotionally. The whole system starts to respond as if it's a life and death situation. But that's because if you feel unworthy when you're wrong, you're going to potentially face being thrown out of the tribe, so to speak, right? If the culture tells you we're only going to love you if you're right, then becoming right becomes life and death.
Yeah, I mean, we have a saying on our webpage and on our Discord: be wrong, make money.
I love that. I love that phrase.
Like, who cares, right? The goal of trading, obviously, is to make money. So be wrong. So what? Hey, look how wrong it was. I made X amount of dollars today.
That's right.
I was totally wrong. Okay, good. And that's really why I sort of that phrase, I think, is
such a great
get that point across. This is not about being right. You're dealing with a bunch of random numbers going up and down, mostly randomly.
Yep.
So to think that you're going to be right all the time, guessing a random number, it's just self-defeating,
For sure. For sure.
It's like flipping a coin and saying you're going to be right. I mean, you got a 50-50 chance. And just because you said heads and it came up heads doesn't mean you were right.
Right.
So you had a 50-50 chance. And if it comes up tails when you said heads, it doesn't mean you were wrong. You had a 50-50 chance, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's what I tell people to do all the time. Think about it in those terms. Are you going to beat your head if you call heads on a coin flip and it comes out tails? Are you going to say, oh my God, I'm horrible, I'm so stupid, I'm this and that? No, it's very easy to understand.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50 chance to begin with.
Yeah. But most people aren't coming from probability careers. Most people are coming from, I think of the kids that have an education through, let's say, the Montessori schools versus our current, curriculum. Our standard public schools were created to create factory workers who didn't think for themselves. So you were only rewarded when you were right and not rewarded for, anything else. The kids that can make mistakes without a hiccup are the ones who probably grow up into adults who can be more comfortable with being human. And most people aren't coming into trading. They've come from academia. I don't know, you tell me, but I see the people that are the most educated, the ones who are potentially coming from the corporate world, who try to make the transition. It's hard for them.
There's a famous story that somebody told on our Discord a while ago about he is a broker and he deals with some hedge fund clients, and he had these two younger portfolio managers in their 20s that had gone to Ivy League colleges and obviously were very smart guys and went to Ivy League MBA schools and came out and were having some trouble trading. And he was talking to the guy and he said, what do you think the problem is? He goes, I think the problem is we are so much smarter than everybody else that we see things way before they do. So we're early on a lot of trades.
Holy crap, an island just a river in Egypt.
So, I mean, that's right to your point, right? I always thought that maybe you go back to the youth and the defense mechanisms you build out, and maybe one of the reasons that I've been decent at this whole thing is that, you talk about school for whatever reason. I don't know what it was. I went through school incredibly rebellious.
Mhm.
I came from a family who valued education a lot. I had two Ivy League parents, and all my aunts and uncles, they were all, Yale and Princeton, and I basically failed out of high school. And for whatever reason, I rebelled against that. So I never learned that idea of, we're training you to
Well,
be a worker bee,
you did learn it. And what you did, in my humble opinion, is you said, no, thank you. Because you and your smarts, Jason, were always present. But you said no to that system. That was why you felt out of it, because you were like, this system doesn't resonate.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that it was a conscious decision like that, but I don't know. I was just
I just remember the story you told me
you know what I mean?
on my podcast about you and how you felt out, and then you got, what was that book? And then you were just devouring them, and you were kind of like, oh, maybe this failing was just not reflective of my competency at all.
Oh, I
I
never thought that it was. I mean, I think back
could.
to high school. I can't remember a day in high school where I even brought a book home. And it's funny because, and all I did was get in trouble and, all that. And we can get into why that was. Was I looking for the attention of my father that I wasn't getting? That whole thing. Trust me, I've been through a million psychotherapy sessions. But the amazing thing through it all, I have to say, my mother was a child psychologist and took a lot of heat because she was getting called into school all the time because they were
Mhm.
expelling me all the time. I got kicked out of 3 high schools, and she took this approach. And truthfully, she went to a psychiatrist to help her with this. Who I still remember, Dr. Dunton, who I'm sure is not alive anymore because he was old then. He was at Columbia, and Dr. Dunton's entire theory was let him go, just let him do it. And she let me. And other parents looked at her like she was crazy.
So much
Parents
judgment.
didn't even want their kids to be around me because all I ever did was get in trouble, and probably rightly so. But she took the approach of just let him go, and eventually he will find himself.
Totally.
Um, and to this day, I thank her. She's still alive, and
What
when
a
I see her,
gift.
I say to her all the time, "That was the most." I have children. That's an incredibly hard thing to do. Incredibly hard thing to do.
Yep.
And with me, it would have been even more incredibly hard to do because the choices
Yep.
I was making was not, I'm going to
Yep.
come to school and get straight A's and be the valedictorian. The
Right.
choices I was making was, I'm going to come home from school and just go out and figure out where I can get in trouble again.
Yeah, totally. What
Uh,
a gift she gave you. What an absolute gift. But that
it was,
shows you she didn't have her ego tied up in how you showed up. She was able to not let it reflect upon her. She was like, he's his own person. He has to figure this out himself.
right.
That is such unconditional love.
It's exactly right. It's so true. And of course, I didn't know it then, but
No,
once I became a parent and I look at my life and where I've been able to take it to, I give her all the credit in the world. I really do.
incredible. What a gift. But let me tell you this, Jason, even though wasn't formulatedly conscious, you were conscious deep in your soul, you were tracking her, letting you be. You were tracking her, giving you the freedom to find your own footing. You knew in your heart and your soul she was still loving you in spite of the fuck ups. She was like, still had your back in the most ultimate way. And kids know that shit. we know if we're still loved in spite of whatever mistakes we're making. And that heals us and helps us figure ourselves out. And that is what she did because her ego wasn't caught up in what the other parents thought of her, the teachers thought of her. She didn't give a shit. She
I mean,
wanted to do what was best for you.
she literally went to a conference. She was a school psychologist. She went to a school psychology conference and they did a case study. And the case study was of me.
Oh
I
my
didn't have my name in there, but she's reading it and she's recognizing the situation.
wow. What a superhero she is. She is the ultimate superhero. Did you ever hear that story about the butterfly and how, somebody's watching this butterfly try to get the caterpillar who's in the cocoon and it's trying to come out of the cocoon and it's struggling. And the observer is looking at it thinking, oh, that poor thing. Maybe I can help it so it doesn't have to struggle so much. So it tears that cocoon hole a little bit wider so it doesn't have to struggle so much to come out. And then when it comes out, because it didn't have to struggle and squeeze through that hole and have all the moisture in its wings removed, when it comes out, it can't fly because we didn't let it go through its process.
Yeah, and it's so hard as a parent to allow your kid to struggle is the hardest thing in the world. It rips your heart apart, you know.
It's got
And
to.
with me, I think it was clearly very hard for my mom, but somehow she did it. I mean, I can remember sitting there in the principal's office day after day, week after week. They're calling my mom and they're talking to me, and I mean, I didn't hear a word that they said. They
No,
couldn't say anything. Oh, Jason, it was always the same story. You test so well, and you could be so smart, and but why won't you go to school? And blah, blah, blah. You got to start doing this, and it didn't even register. It just went literally one ear and out the other.
totally.
Um,
And not every kid can learn in that kind of structured environment. And so you already could recognize that about yourself. You could see that wasn't the environment that you were going to flourish in. So you said, I'm not playing this game.
yeah,
This is a game I don't want to play.
I think I was just an obnoxious asshole, but
I
okay.
don't I don't think you are. I think you just were being given a parameter that just wasn't working well for you. I don't think that would have been the way you showed up if you were in a place like a Montessori school where you were allowed to be a leader. Have you even seen those studies about the kids that are the quote unquote troublemakers when they put them in environments like outdoor classrooms and stuff? The kids that were the troublemakers actually become the leaders of all the kids.
Well, too late now.
But you are a leader of all the kids, don't you see? You are a leader.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about me. Let's talk more about you and how you can help people.
All right. Well, this assessment, I think, helps traders because it helps them understand where they might be in their own way. And it helps them be able to put a focus on what tactically they can do. And, at the end of that assessment, they're going to make a determination if they think coaching would serve them or not. Obviously, I will give my opinion. And at that point, most traders will make a decision whether or not they want to work with me as a coach. But the assessment can stand alone. It is incredibly insightful. And, I don't work with anybody on my team until I put them through it because it helps me understand not just what's happening around how they're going to work and the work side of what life is going to ask of them or this position is going to ask of them, but it also allows us both to see what's happening on the self side, which I do feel is the foundation of whatever the work side is. Our foundation is ourself. The rest of how we work sits upon that. And that's why it's so important for that relationship to self to be as whole and healthy as possible. And traders have a tendency to be way overly self-critical. And that, believe it or not, drains them of a lot of their power. And, you can have a Porsche, but if you don't have gas in the tank, it ain't going anywhere. Like, you got to fill up the tank. And I just see a lot of energy expended on the wrong things. And it just, doesn't help them kind of transcend the places that are in their way.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing because any trader who has been doing this long enough has gone through a bad run. And it's so emotionally draining and it's so emotionally scarring to go through that bad run. that it affects you going forward.
Yeah.
You don't want that to happen again. So you start to be very self-critical. You start to doubt yourself very much. I go through it all the time. 35 years. Okay. The
Yeah.
last 25 years, and in particular the last 7 or 8 years, have been very, very good to me. But I still go through it
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
You talk about being hard on yourself and self-doubt and all that. It's just a constant battle.
Yeah.
It's in fairness, I tell people not to do this.
Yeah. I get that.
It's incredibly painful.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly painful career. It's an incredibly painful way to go through life.
Yeah. But that's why I
Actually,
feel
I thank, I'm an atheist, but I thank God
yeah.
for the person that I currently have as my spouse
Yeah.
because she somehow puts up with it. She says to me, what's wrong? Something's bothering you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I can't even. And she just knows it's the trading.
Yeah.
She kind of knows that getting on me about I'm in a bad mood or I'm acting like a depressive or, is not going to help it. So she just kind of backs off, and what she does is she tries to spend some time with me and make me happy, which is just a blessing for me.
Beautiful. What a gift.
It's very hard to find that, the people around you
That's
that are not involved in this
yeah.
could never understand the emotional drain that this stuff takes on you.
Yeah.
I
For
have
sure.
this year has been incredibly draining for me.
Yeah.
Not really making any money, not really losing any money.
Mm.
It's just up, back, up, back. We're 5 months into the year. I'm like, I just wasted 5 months of my time. I didn't spend any less effort
Right.
these
Right.
5 months than I spent last year when I killed it. Spent just as much effort on this 5 months than I did then.
Yeah.
And I know I went back just this past weekend and looked at my returns over 25 years. And it's like there's plenty of 5 month periods where I haven't really gotten anywhere. This is no different. And that makes me feel a little bit better knowing that, but it's still very, very difficult.
Still stings.
The,
So
the,
much effort, energy.
the emotional damage and the strength emotionally that you need to get through this kind of business and this kind of career is incredible. And that's why I think, having somebody that knows these things
Yeah.
better than you do, such as Kim or a coach, somebody like that, can be very helpful. Just if nothing else, just to have somebody to talk about it with.
Yeah.
It's
For
just like
sure.
you always say about psychiatrists.
Yeah.
But the good thing about this particular therapist, I think, is she is specifically a therapist for trading. So she has studied this stuff through the lens of trading. She has worked with a lot of traders, and they're not going to be very much different. So she knows what you're saying because she's heard it all, right? It doesn't matter if you're a futures trader, an equities trader, long only, long short, commodities, stock, whatever the hell it is, systematic, discretionary, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. We all go through the same exact emotional pain. So anyway, if you are going through that, and if you think that you need some help with that, I personally recommend that you talk to this woman right here. And if nothing else, know that she's no moron because she lives in Hawaii. So how bad could she be?
Brooklyn born, New Yorker at heart. But yeah, this place it just called me home when I got here. It's hard to argue with. Hard to
Yeah.
argue with.
So tell me where people can find you.
They can find me on the wallstreetcoach.com. That's the website. Or they can find me on X under Kim Ann Curtin, Curtin.
Sorry, it's the Wall Street Coach or just Wall Street Coach?
The wallstreetcoach.com.
TheWallStreetCoach.com.
Yes.
And if they come and talk to you and check you out, I kind of
I'd set up a call. I'll set up a call with everybody that wants one. We can have a conversation to understand what they're struggling with and what I think would be the best next step. For some, it probably will be this assessment. For others, it might be something else. But I have a lot of different ways traders work with me. Let's hop on a call and find out what is going to be best for you. That's what I would say is ideal.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, like I say, check it out. I recommend it. Don't cost nothing. Don't cost nothing
Cost
to ask her what she thinks. And
That's right.
I found Kim to be a very good listener and a very understanding person, and she knows what the hell I think she's talking about when it comes to this. So if you're struggling, and if you're not struggling now, then you're going to struggle soon. But
Probably.
and you need some help, then
Thank
who are
you.
you going to call? This is
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much. Thanks for the advocacy, the kind words. And I always enjoy our conversations. They're never superficial. And whether we're in Vegas drinking whiskey or you're teaching me how to play poker, you're always making me laugh. That was the best poker lesson. And you still haven't finished that lesson, by the way. So I'm holding you to it. I want the second poker lesson.
Yeah. No one to hold them, no one to fold them.
Exactly. Just listen to Kenny Rogers, right?
Really all it takes. All right, good. Well, thanks for your time, Kim. I'm really glad that, first of all, thank you for giving me that assessment and going it through with me. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I've really liked it.
I'm
And
really
I've
glad.
looked at it a few times, and I've really spent a lot of time trying to think about that. And so
Okay.
thanks for that, and thanks for coming on here and letting people know that you're out there because I think it's valuable.
Thank you so much for having me and for your trust. It means a lot. And just thank you for the work you do and for your incredible authenticity as a trader. We both know there's not a lot of that going around out there. So thank you for being so honest with this community.
Great.